I recently wanted to learn a little bit more about electronic theory and repair, so I figured a good way of doing that is take up the hobby of repairing old Nintendos. And I've done a couple of them already, and I find it's pretty interesting figuring out what the problem is and getting them working again. And I've had pretty good success with it, but I did want to create a way to make it a little bit easier to isolate the problems. So what I want to do is use this unit where it's missing some screws and the case is missing some pieces and it's a little rough in some areas. But the board inside is in really good shape, so I wanted to use the board to create a test board where I can take components from other Nintendos and swap those parts in and make it a little easier to isolate what the problem is. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I apologize, I'm not going to be showing any of the soldering or desoldering I'm going to be doing because I don't really have a good camera setup and it's kind of in the way when I'm doing any of that kind of deal. Plus, you can get spared from any swearing that might occur if I screw something up or burn myself, so I'll save you from that. But here's a quick look at my setup here. I don't have the best equipment. They're kind of the cheaper versions of the desoldering kit and the the soldering station, but they do get the job done. They've worked fairly well for me, but there are better ones out there, especially with the desoldering one. I got to clean that one fairly often to make sure it's got enough suction to remove all the solder from the through holes. But so far, for what I paid for them, I've been happy with the setup. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all the chips from the board, and I will get started after that. I just got finished removing all the integrated circuits, the 3 transistors, and the 48-pin connector that apparently isn't used for anything on the Nintendo. I found this pretty cheap lot of Nintendos, and when this one came in, the motherboard and the chips and everything were in really good condition. They were clean. Looked like the thing had been sitting in a closet for maybe 20 years or so. It didn't work. All it took was a little bit of brasso to the pins, and it started working really well. So I decided to make this motherboard into a test board. So what I'm going to do is socket all these chips and the transistors. If there's any other component in here that often goes bad on the Nintendo, let me know. I can remove those and put sockets. The point of doing this is to repair other units, and if I suspect a unit being bad in a different broken Nintendo, I can just take that and swap it out with this board and hopefully verify if that's what's causing the problem or not. There's some components I'm not really familiar with, like the RA. I think they mean resistor arrays, since it says 10K times 12, and then there's like DA, the 3. There's a couple of these things. I'm not sure what those are. I'm going to have to do a little research on that, but yeah, so that's pretty much what I've done. I'm going to solder in the sockets and test it up and make sure everything still works. I just got all the sockets soldered in place and installed all the chips with the exception of the PPU. Left that out for now so I could show you the type of sockets I used. I went with this style because I find that they hold up a little bit better for multiple swap outs. I find the other style that I ended up using for the transistors over here, it's the kind that come packaged with the high def NES. I find those are good for maybe one-time use where you're going to leave it in there, but if you're pulling the chips in and out more than once, I find that they're not holding they're not gripping as good, and they might lead to loss of connection for the circuit. So I went with this style here. I did cut out a piece on this socket, that way I could bend the capacitor over, and this board is ready for a high-def NES install for testing purposes anyways. If I wanted to install the high-def NES and actually put it back in the Nintendo and assemble everything properly, I would have to remove this extra socket on the U9 chip because it sticks up a little bit further than and it would get in the way of the interposer. But for testing purposes, it's perfectly fine for that. So I eventually want to build something to put this in, because I don't want to have to, pull it all apart every time I test a chip on this. So I want to mount this to something else and have the switches, maybe some sort of plastic or maybe a wood piece. I haven't decided exactly how I'm going to go about that, but once I do that, I'll definitely post a video. Now, all I have left to do is I'm going to go ahead and change out the caps inside here. I can't get that off with one. There we go. While I've got all this apart, I'm just going to change out the caps, a little preventative maintenance, so get the best quality I can with the RF and the composite. So I'll do that and test it out. So I'll be right back and do it once I do that. I just finished changing out all the capacitors, and I'm not sure what a burnt capacitor smells like, but it smelled pretty nasty in there, almost like cat piss or something. And this one looks pretty mushroomed out. I read it, the capacitance with this cheap meter I have here, and it read a little bit low, but not bad. But I know there's other things that like leak or whatever. I'm not sure what it's called, but I know this cheap meter is not going to read everything that could go wrong with the capacitor, so I'm glad that I went and changed those ones out. So I'm going to go ahead and put it all back together and test it out. Hopefully it'll start up. Alright, I got everything put back together, and when I soldered in the RF module, I decided to just solder in one of the clamp points instead of all four, so when I take this out to test another unit, I can get it out a little bit easier, because that thing's a pain in the ass to remove. Eventually what I want to do is get this thing mounted into a piece of plastic or wood or something, and have it with all the ICs face up, so the slot would have to, the cartridge would have to be inserted from the underneath it. I also want to have some sort of way to have a power RF module where it kind of clicks in place, where it doesn't have to be soldered in each time. So I'll figure out a way to do that, and once I get started with that project, I will make some more videos and keep everyone posted on how that goes. Yeah, but everything works just fine. Graphics are great. It looks a little bit better than before since I changed out the caps in the RF module. Sounds just fine. I haven't seen anything wrong with it. I went ahead and ran the test ROM, and the RAM and everything was good, so it looks like this project went flawless. So I really don't do too many repairs on the NES units. I'm just getting into this as more of a hobby, but I do find it really fun to take apart some old units that have been sitting there collecting dust or left out in the sun or had stuff spilled on them, and trying to get them to work again. So figuring out what makes this thing tick. So hopefully you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making this, and if you have any suggestions for this test unit, please let me know. And if anyone can think of a reason why you would want to have this in a test unit, let me know. As far as I know, this wasn't used in the US models of the Nintendo. I think they used that in the Famicom to connect the disk drive, but I think for a test unit it would be more beneficial to leave that out and have the pin traces exposed for a diagnostic. So like this video if you enjoyed watching it. If you didn't, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.